Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried & Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are fantastic. I'm telling you, we're trending. We're coming up on 500,000 downloads. Ridiculous. It just blows my mind. So thank you guys for supporting this. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Siegfried & Jensen, Wasatch Recovery, Veracity Networks, and iHill Institute. Thank you so much for believing me in this cause. I really do believe that some of these stories, if not all of them, are saving lives. We just talked about this a minute ago. I also would like to thank our previous guests. Thank you for being on and being vulnerable. Today's going to be no different. We have a firehouse today, Malory Ruesch. Malory, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. I'm honored and excited.
Absolutely. She drove all the way up from St. George. We're live here at Wasatch Recovery. And she is so passionate about what she does that she was willing to drive up here, and that says a lot about you already. And I'm actually honored to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me give you a little background on Malory. She is an author, speaker, survivor whose passion is on fire, and you guys are going to get a lot of this today. Rock bottom has become the foundation on which she is building her career. I love that. You know, rock bottom is a good foundation, you know, and someone in recovery can understand that. Right? But not even in recovery. Life in general sometimes takes us down to that foundation again. We have to rebuild. I love how you said that. Her greatest strength is loving others until they're strong enough to love themselves. She travels to high schools to speak about addiction and recovery, and she uses her story to bring hope and inspire everyone she meets. She's the mother of 2 beautiful little girls and is married to her best friend. She is soon to publish a new book, which I'm excited to learn more about. The Way in 90 Days, an intense memoir about a promise that changed her life forever. A healing program for anyone whose life has been impacted by addiction. So we're going to talk more about that. And then Malory's greatest goal is to change the world's way of recovery because healing is the ultimate goal. Beautifully said. That's directly from Malory. So here we are. Thanks for joining us. How was the drive up?
It's not bad. I love driving because I get to sit there in my thoughts and you know think about how my life is today and how beautiful it is and all the opportunities that keep coming forth without me having to knock on the doors, you know, meeting you through just social media. I mean, it's crazy, you know, so it was a good drive. It was fun time to spend with some friends too.
Yeah, it's amazing when you're kind of on this side of where you're at in your life. You're doing so well that, you know, the grass seems greener, the sky seems bluer, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You start seeing beauty for more of what it is than what you think it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you to share your story with us today. I'd like to start off just asking you, where did you grow up, and tell us a little bit about your childhood.
So I actually grew up here. I was born in Sandy, grew up in Murray, and then my family got really sick of the snow, so they all kind of started They went down to St. George and enjoyed the heat more. So I've been there since I was about 8 years old.
Okay. Did you like the snow?
I love the snow for short periods of time.
Right.
Driving in it, you know, I can already barely see over the dash, so we don't need to add snow into this situation, but.
Right. Well, tell us, what was your childhood like? How were you? Were you this Spitfire back then too, and this woman full of passion and confidence?
So my childhood, I grew up with a single mom, who I didn't find out till a little later on struggled with alcoholism, and my father has never been involved. I'm the youngest of 5 girls. 3 of them are on my dad's side, and I've actually never met them. And then my closest sister is 10 years older than me, but has a different father who's very involved. And so growing up, my sister and I, as much as I wanted us to be close, she always had an escape route when things with my mom got bad. Okay. And so she would get to go live with her dad. And I think a resentment had started to build in me as far as, why would you leave me here in this situation to defend for myself Like, you're my sister, where are you going? So growing up, it did kind of put a wedge between us. My father has never been involved. I think that was the very first cause of what threw me into my addiction was, those feelings of, why am I not good enough? Abandonment, inadequacy.
Yeah, that seems pretty common for younger kids when the father or the mom's not present, that they have these feelings and beliefs that I'm not good enough. Why wasn't I enough to keep you guys together?
Exactly.
Or why did that person leave? And those feelings of being abandoned, right?
Absolutely.
Pretty common. So how old were you when you started noticing some of these feelings and struggles?
I think when I started in elementary, I thought my situation was pretty normal. My mom, is my best friend. She's always been my hero.
Right.
And I didn't notice how different my life was than other kids until I started going to elementary school. And, I'd get to see both parents picking up their child, or I'd have a program that neither one of my parents were at.
Yeah.
Little things like that I just started noticing through my peers. And that's when I really started questioning what's different and why am I so different?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's pretty common for a kid at that age going through, when parents aren't together, and you do start comparing even as a young kid, like, why I wish I had both my parents picking me up, or where's my dad been, and that kind of thing. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Did you ever voice that as a young child, like that you were struggling with anyone, or did you just kind of keep it in, or?
So having a mom in alcoholism, I had a very strong facade. I, raised myself a lot of the time, and I kind of became the parent in some situations to where I just had to be strong. And I was in the middle of loving my mom better, thinking that, I was responsible for helping her heal and helping her get better. And really just defining a worth of myself through my grades and my academics. So I voiced it a couple times. I'd make a comment in passing to my family, like, why isn't my dad here? But they all just kept telling me, based on my age, what was appropriate to tell me, that it was better that he wasn't involved.
Wow. Been probably tough to hear that, though, still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, to hear that as a young kid, like, it's better off that he wasn't around. It's like, oh, like, how bad was it, right?
Right.
How bad could that situation be?
Yeah.
Well, so talk a little bit about, how it progressed with you. You mentioned there was some resentments, and you said that maybe one of the reasons that fueled your addiction, and just get into that, and this, tell us your story, and tell us how this all kind of played out, and get to the point where you're doing all these amazing things now.
Okay. So my story starts when, I started identifying these feelings of inadequacy and abandonment and being alone. I defined my worth by my grades. I got straight A's. I was great in high school. I was in the yearbook committee, student council, honor society. I was scheduled to graduate early. And everyone saw on the outside that I looked like I was doing great. I had a great life. But anytime in school that there was an activity to sign up for, I was signing up for it. Not because necessarily I wanted to be involved in that activity, but anything that kept me from going home and having to face my reality, I was going to get involved in. And so I became a cheerleader for high school, which practices were all week. And that really kept me busy and focused. And then finally I got to a point where the college ended up offering me classes to graduate 2 years early.
Okay.
So half the day I spent at the college, and then half the day I'd spend at high school. And the progression really started when, college students are a lot older than high school students. And being in college, I am an extrovert. I love people. I love making friends.
Yeah.
And I believe that you meet everyone for a reason. And so anytime, like now, my mindset now is anytime I meet anybody, it's like, what can I learn from you, or what can you take from me? Like, there's a reason our paths have crossed.
Yeah. Can I stop you right there? You have a really good ability in what you just said there. Like, you made me feel like I was the most important person in the world when I just met you. And that's a gift. So I want to just point that out, like what you're saying is completely genuine. So, because I felt that from you.
Yeah, well, I didn't even meet you, and just by everything that you do, if I can make a portion of the impact you have, like, I will. I mean, don't get mad when I try to do better than you, but I'll allow you to be part of it if you want.
No, I want you to, and I'm going to help you, and we'll get you there, and I'll be the first one saying, awesome.
Cool.
But I really did feel that way, and I think you're really good. I do want to also say, you talked about how you were trying to kind of even hide your pain through getting good grades, being the best at everything that you were putting your mind into. That's all external stuff. But when you would go home or when you were alone, were you sad? Did you feel depressed? Did you cry alone? That kind of thing when you weren't around people?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would go home and I mean, more than anything, I just wanted to spend time with my mom.
Yeah.
So whether that be sitting by her in the bathroom on the toilet or, as she was sick or laying in bed and rubbing her back, there was just so many times where I think I hid that sadness and I just waited until it was before bed and I would just fall asleep crying. But I never felt the ability to necessarily show that to anyone just because I was defining my worth by what I was allowing people to see.
Yeah. The good grades and just all the stuff that you were doing to be the best at. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And even being outgoing at that time, like, hey, look at me, I'm confident, this and that. And I think that happens a lot where a lot of times when we feel inferior, we try to act superior.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think anyone listening to this can understand that. I think we all do that on some level. We put on a mask. No, I'm good. Everything's great. Then when we get home, we're alone in our own thoughts. We're like, I'm hurting.
Which is an amazing topic that I hope we will get to. That's the problem today.
Yeah, and we'll talk. Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll
So
get there.
Continue with your story. I just wanted to point out those things because, again, I felt so important when I met you. And again, that's a gift. And that's why you're going to be so good at what you're doing.
Thank you.
Honestly.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet. So
Okay,
continue on.
So college, I obviously had high school friends and college friends. The college friends were a lot older than me. And I started, getting that feeling of belonging, that feeling of, someone accepting me and being a part of. And I started getting invited to parties, to, college events.
Right.
And I mean, for me, yeah, I'm only 4'11", but with the people I was hanging out with, they never really ID'd me because I just would blend in with the environment that I was in. But I had such a longing for just a place to belong and feeling loved and feeling wanted that I wanted to participate in those events. And those events also, kept me from going home, kept my mind busy.
Right.
So events, college parties started turning into, meetings where beer was there. And I ended up walking into my very first party one night. And right as I walk in, someone hands me a red Solo cup. And in that moment, my mind was like, it's okay to not be perfect, Mal. It's okay to not be strong all the time.
Yeah.
Humans make mistakes. And life is a series of phases, and we all deserve those phases. Those are what we use as stepping stones in learning and developing who we want to become.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I was sitting there basically justifying the fact that I deserve to have a beer. Every kid my age is drinking right now, and it's normal.
Yeah. That's interesting. You had that thought when someone hands you the cup.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how we will justify doing something ultimately we know it's probably not a good idea.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We can all kind of relate with that. And I can relate with that where if I look back on any time I made a mistake and I did it like consciously, I somehow justified it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So it's interesting you had those thoughts when someone handed you that cup.
Yeah. Little did I know that red Solo cup was going to be the beginning of a very long journey for me.
Wow. Well, tell us about that journey because I know your story is incredible. There's, hell and back probably 10 times.
Absolutely.
And here you are, though. So, talk about, so you had this you start drinking that night or whatever, and it opens up the door to everything else. So talk about that.
Yeah, so the beer obviously gave me this feeling of, relaxation, what alcohol does. And one party became multiple, and multiple started to become every weekend. Well, finally, I ended up meeting a boy in this college group of friends, and he was just like me, extroverted, the light of the room, someone that everyone adored and hung out with. And I ended up befriending him and was like, okay, I'm going to try this relationship, right? He was 6 years older than me at the time. And once I ended up connecting with him, it became a relationship, and the partying only got worse. He was a very heavy drinker. And weed then, it progresses to weed. I feel like everyone has the same story, but with different names and places, right?
Yeah.
Take out all the specifics and it's all the same.
It is pretty similar.
So I ended up smoking marijuana for my first time, and that was about 16 still. One night I was at a party with my boyfriend, and I was extremely crossfaded. I told him I had a headache. I wasn't feeling good. He ended up pulling a pill out of his pocket. Wasn't sure what it was, asked him, and he's like, it'll just make you feel better. Just take it. Well, that was the beginning of my oxycodone addiction. And in that moment, I realized that the pill was numbing all of those feelings of inadequacy and abandonment and anger and resentment in me. And I didn't have to drink a 30-pack. It was like, wow, something so little can do the amount of numbing that a 30-pack could. So
wow.
Easily it was a transition that was super easy.
Super easy. Yeah. Again, very common. We hear this all the time. Hey, just try this. If you're hurting, just try this. I've heard that story 1,000 times, and it's sad on a lot of levels because of how that opens the door. Like, oh, this is what was missing. I'll do this.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. From the oxycodone addiction, you obviously are aware, but for those that are listening that are not aware, oxycodone is a downer. It is something that creates a physical dependency in which you are a slave to. And in the process of getting addicted to oxycodone, I was no longer in control. I had lost control the second that I took that first pill, and I just didn't know it yet. So my addiction only got worse. The boyfriend that I had at the time, he ended up getting prescriptions through Vegas. It was the time of the opiate pandemic.
Yeah.
And doctors were just prescribing oxycodone like crazy. So my boyfriend at the time, I was standing in his home, and he went into his brother's room, and he started telling him, like, we are out. We need to get more. Like, how can we do that? He goes, well, come here. We'll get you set up. So he ends up laying himself on the couch, his chest on the couch and his legs on the floor. And his brother just kicks him in the back and just hurts him extremely bad.
Wow.
The ability and what the pill was making him do was complete powerlessness. It didn't matter if his back was broken. The pill was more important. Well, in doing that, he was able to get papers to get over 5 prescriptions a month outside through Vegas.
Really?
So we started taking obviously a lot more than we should have been, and thought it was a never-ending time. And all of a sudden, all the doctors got cut off. So everyone was unable to fill their prescriptions, and we started panicking. We were physically gonna withdraw.
Right.
And I have had so many friends that have lost their life from the fear of withdrawal, because it's a pain that is so unexplainable. I mean, your legs shake, you sweat, you are constantly throwing up, you can't eat, you're hungry. I remember during one of my withdrawals, I was sitting in the shower, fully clothed, just in a ball, bawling my eyes out, just praying for the pain to go away. And withdrawal usually lasts about 3 to 4 days.
Yeah, it's like the flu times 1,000.
Yeah.
You know,
COVID times 1,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And I think people don't understand that, who have never maybe been down that road. But what keeps people stuck in that is that very reason. I don't want to be sick because I know what that's going to feel like.
Right.
So I'm going to keep doing this, knowing I shouldn't be doing this because this is killing me.
Yep.
And again, it keeps you in that addiction loop, and here you are in that, curled up in a ball, just going, please take this away from me.
Yeah, my mentor told me that the power of the pain will always be in control. And that goes with not only the pain of a physical withdrawal as far as a drug, because that is what is controlling the addict from stopping using, but also the pain that we haven't faced and the pain of things that we've been through in our childhood that we haven't faced and dealt with. Those will forever be in control because that is the pain. That's what's driving us, is the fear and the pain.
Wow. That is so true, right? So here you are going through this, how did you find yourself out of this, or what happens next, for you?
So we're going through withdrawal, and my boyfriend's brother ends up saying, I can fix this. I can get you something. Everyone we had contacted was out. And so he leaves for about a half hour, comes back and hands us just something to make us feel better. Once again, that situation of here, take it.
Yeah.
So I knew that obviously it wasn't the pills that he had in his hand, and I ended up using it, and that started my heroin addiction.
Yeah.
From that point on, things only got worse. I mean, I was traveling to Vegas back and forth, getting involved in drug deals, putting myself in situations that were completely unsafe. And by this point, my grades were dropping miserably.
Yeah.
And so through this heroin addiction getting worse, obviously I was then introduced to meth. The downer, it can be counteracted with something to give you energy. People start noticing when, especially someone like me that has a personality that's so loving and so outgoing and so loud, like when I start sitting in a corner and curling up and not saying a word, like there's a problem.
Yeah, people notice it quickly with
Absolutely.
you, right? Like, what is wrong with her? She hasn't said a word.
Yeah,
that is not her, right?
So then I think my life really started to turn around, I thought, on Mother's Day of 2013. I don't know still to this day, Todd, what got into me. I don't know what created this for me, but I made the decision that this is not the life I wanted. I'm a successful individual that loves life and loves people. And of all the things I could have chose for a career, I chose to be an addict.
Yeah.
So I ended up making that decision that night. I go, I'm done. Despite my boyfriend and my friends in our room at that time using meth and heroin.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done. So I ended up going through 3 days of withdrawal, and I woke up on Mother's Day. So this was 3 days. So I woke up on Mother's Day morning about 6 a.m. with the feeling of freedom. I was clean, and my environment hadn't changed, but my mind had.
Right.
So I call my mom that morning. I'm like, Mom, I'm clean. I want to see you. I want to come home. My mom was sober at this time. We didn't get the chance to actually be clean or sober together. So I was like, okay, I'm clean. I want to come home. We ended up going to breakfast that morning and laughing and crying and just having the best relationship again.
Yeah.
And she goes, okay, you can come home on, the stipulation that you stay clean and you move all your stuff out of your boyfriend's house. So she ended up having a pedicure with her siblings that day and her mom for Mother's Day. So she's like, I'm going to go to my pedicure. You and your sister go get your stuff from the house. So we ended up driving there. The second I pulled in my driveway, St. George SWAT hits my house, pulls me out of my car, throws me to the ground, and completely does a full search of everything.
Really?
Yeah. And in that moment, I remember being cuffed and sitting next to the tree while they were just raiding the house. And at first it was like, wait, I'm clean. I made the decision to change. Like, this can't be happening right now. Like, I just went through withdrawal to be free and I'm cuffed. But then I started realizing, looking back, it's like, just because you decide to get clean doesn't mean there isn't wreckage that needs to be repaired. It doesn't mean that the price of the choices you've made in your past have been paid. And, I just kept justifying, like, I'm clean. That should be enough for you guys to know that I'm sorry for everything I've caused.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. So that I was taken to jail. I did about a week in jail, and my mom bailed me out under the same stipulation. You're going to get your stuff. We'll start off where we were at and
Right.
bring you home. We end up driving to my boyfriend's house. I walk in. I kid you not, Todd. This is strange.
Mm-hmm.
I go in. My mom's talking to my boyfriend's dad outside, you know, talking about how sorry they are. And as I open the door, there is a bottle of heroin that we had kept our heroin in sitting just as your foot is in the middle of our floor.
Right.
Just sitting there. And I'm sitting here, okay. At first, you know, that addict mentality is like, okay, they're setting me up. Like, they're watching me.
We're SWAT.
Yeah, where are they? This is definitely not going to go well. So I ended up packing all my stuff and realizing as I go to grab the heroin that our bottle of meth is sitting under the bed. How does SWAT raid your house and leave all of the evidence they have against you? Like, that
Right.
is unheard of.
Yeah.
And a lot, you'll hear me say, what are the odds? Because, you know, addiction is a game of odds and the odds are always against you. So I use that quote a lot.
Sure.
So I end up thinking, you know, well, as long as I don't use it, I'll be fine. I can sell it, use the money to get back on my feet and go on living a normal life.
And that right there is even a
Dangerous
blunder.
road.
Oh, I'll sell it.
Yeah.
I'll keep it with me. I'll sell, you know, right there. You're like, okay, that's not a good idea when you look back on it.
No,
right?
no, absolutely not. And it was that night that I ended up, you know, going downstairs to my mom's basement when she had fallen asleep to see how much I had, calling old contacts, you know, through social media.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know, one time won't hurt.
Wow.
So that then began an even worse spiral. From May of 2013 to August was my next arrest. But in that time, chaos and chaos.
Always gets worse too.
Absolutely.
I want to point something out that and I think this is important. Have you noticed, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, like whenever you make a decision to do something good or the right thing, it's always challenged.
Yep.
I mean, you walk in and there's the heroin and then the meth's in there and you're like, no, I said I'm done. Why is this stuff still here?
Absolutely.
But I just find that, and every time I look in my past too, and especially back then when I'm trying to get past that addiction and the environment, every time I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm not kidding you. It was challenged that night or the next morning. It's like, what? Where did this come from?
Absolutely.
It's like out of the blue, right? It's always like we're tested.
Absolutely. And I will say, you know, with where my life is at today, life never necessarily stops challenging you. It won't.
I like that.
And you're going to face things, even being clean, that are going to continue to challenge you and continue where you're at and how genuine and how much you want something.
Yeah.
But
why are you getting emotional?
just because, you know, my life is so beautiful today. And I'm just finally, for one time, I'm just so proud of who I am and what I'm doing and where I'm going, that, you know, the devil has no remorse of that. He's never like, you know, you just go ahead and keep doing the great things you're doing. Like, he just wants to keep trying to slice you, you know, and you just got to be a fighter, and you got to realize that, you know, life may not always get easier, but you get stronger, and therefore things become easier.
Yeah, it feels easier. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's the same challenges, but yet you're stronger now, and therefore they don't feel as intense anymore. It's like, you know, you may come across, you know, a thing of meth, you know, in someone's house or whatever. It wouldn't affect you as much as it would have maybe back then.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
You'd probably be a lot stronger around that this time for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I love the emotion, by the way. Thanks for being vulnerable.
Oh, you just wait. We're just getting started.
Buckle up, people.
Yep. Here we go. So after that, after trying it again, that night in my mom's basement, I ended up contacting a bunch of people, and I found myself near August sitting in a hotel room with people that were intravenous users. Mm-hmm. And I had never been an intravenous user. I was that kid in the doctor's office that they would bring in 5 nurses to hold down. I could not stand the thought of a needle.
Yeah. I'm the same way.
I had been up for about 3 days at this point, and your body starts to give out. You know, you have to have sleep.
Yeah.
And we had ran out of meth at this time, so I ended up falling asleep on the bed of a Motel 6 with a few of the people I was running around with. I ended up waking up in a really big panic, my heart racing, I was sweating, only to look over and realize that a dealer was pulling a needle from my arm from introducing me to intravenous use with meth.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, although starting intravenously wasn't my choice, at that point it was the only choice. And it's a depth that once you get to that point, it's never the same, just using simply.
Wow.
So I ended up becoming an intravenous user, and within 3 months, my life went to, it's going to start getting better. I was arrested in August for 15 felonies and 13 misdemeanors at the age of 19. I was facing many, many, many years in prison.
Wow.
I ended up getting arrested. I went to jail, was in there for about 3 months. One of the inmates talked to me, and she ended up motivating me to opt into drug court, which is what I found out my boyfriend in college ended up opting into.
Okay.
So that at the time, it was my motivation. I'm like, perfect. Like, I'm going to get in drug court, get my relationship going back together. Like, still loved him, right? That sick mindset of just, I was addicted to him and codependent to him, just as I was the drugs.
Right.
So I ended up getting in drug court. I ended up getting OSC'd. I ended up going into inpatient rehab. I was kicked out. I ended up going to outpatient rehab, and I failed that as well. So fast forward to my sentencing date. I was standing in the courtroom, and the judge basically looked at me and was like, Mal, you're only 19. I've given you every option to live, and you clearly don't want to. You have failed everything. I had read a document. They give you a documentation of, things that therapists have said, evaluations and stuff like that, which I really wish I wouldn't have gotten, but I did, because it was just validated all of the feelings of myself being a failure, not being enough. Some of them even quoted that I was a lost cause, and I had just given up like I thought everyone else had given up on me. So I stood there in the courtroom.
Wow.
I ended up shooting up meth in the courthouse parking lot. So I was completely distraught. I didn't care anymore.
At that point, you've given up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't care anymore. Death was the easier way out for me. And right then, as the judge was about to slam his hammer down, the doors of the courtroom open. And in walks a man I had never met before. And he goes, Judge, I'd like to talk to you about this case, you and prosecution. He's like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, why are you interrupting my courtroom, basically?
Yeah, right.
So it felt like forever, but he went up and talked to prosecution and the judge and ended up walking out the door. And the judge looks at me and goes, Malory, I don't know what Chuck thinks he can do for you, but I trust him. I'm sentencing you to a 3-year zero tolerance private probation. And hit his hammer down, and I was let go. So as I walk out of the courtroom, he's standing there, and he goes, Hi, Malory, my name's Chuck. And I was like, Hi, Chuck, nice to meet you. And he's like, so I'll see you in a couple weeks. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, you're just releasing me? Like, look at these track marks. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
He's like, yep, I'll see you in 2 weeks to drug test. It'll be out of your system by then. And I was like, okay. So obviously I did what most addicts do, and I mess up again. So I ended up stealing my mom's car, going to Vegas, robbing a hooker. I had a 24 hours of chaos. And as I'm driving back into town, my phone rings. And it was Chuck. And he goes, I need you to come into my office right now. And I was like, wait, you said 2 weeks. It has not been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He's like, you need to get here now. And I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up going to his office, and he could see that I hadn't slept. I was a mess. And he sits me down by his desk, in front of his desk, and grabs a paper off his machine and starts filling it out. And there's just this awkward silence. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, this is the paper I'm sending to the judge. Like, you just messed up. Like, you're on a zero tolerance. You're done. You're going to prison. Instantly, I just started bawling. I was like, please don't send that in. Please don't send that in. Like, I can do this. I've done it before. I know that I'm not a lost cause. Like, I just want to be loved. And he stood up and he's like, what do I have to do to get you to want to live, Mal? Because everyone thinks that you don't want this. And everyone has given up. He's like, I haven't. And I go, I just want someone to care that if I go away, I want someone to care if I go away and notice that I'm gone.
Yeah.
And he goes, why do you think I walked into this courtroom? I'm here because I care, because I love you, and I want to show that you are not a lost cause. He goes, what do I have to do to get you to want to live and to start living?
Yeah. Wow.
And I go, he goes, why, or he asked me, why do all these programs, why did they all fail for you? Why did you fail them? And I go, I'm so tired of being punished into recovery.
Yeah.
I want to be loved and inspired into recovery. And that has played such a huge role, from this point on for me, that, I no longer was getting scolded for all the things I was doing wrong or being told what was wrong with me or the things I needed to change or fix. I already knew all those. Every addict already knows all those. That's
Right.
why we use.
Yeah.
I needed to be told and reminded what people loved about me and what was good, what was valuable, what was going to make a difference so that I could utilize those tools. But when you're constantly reminded of all the things that are wrong with you, how can you not want to take your life?
For sure.
So in that point, he goes, Mal, for the next 6 months, I want you to call me every night. This will tell me two things. One, if you're alive, and two, I can tell by the sound of your voice if you're clean and what you talk about. He goes, you need to leave me, if I don't answer, leave me a 1-minute voicemail telling me about your day. And if I do answer, we'll just have a conversation about how your day was. Over that next 6 months, not only did I gain something that I had been looking for my entire life, but someone who was a father figure,
right,
who cared about how my day went,
yeah,
who cared, about anything I had accomplished or done that was good, but also someone who was willing to spend time with me and to spend time on me. And I looked forward every night. I just started following the rules. Like, my voids and the causes for why I was in addiction were finally being filled with something other than punishment. And I was like, okay, I think I can do this. So I ended up calling him one night for my check-in, super excited to tell him about something. And he answers, he's like, Mal. And I was like, wow, that's like not the usual, like, hey,
right.
how's your day going,
Right.
And he goes, well, your check-ins ended yesterday. You no longer have to call me anymore. And I started crying, and he's like, Mal, it's time for you to start living. He's like, you need to learn to validate yourself now. I've done it for you until you had the strength to do it yourself. Yeah. I loved you until you were strong enough to love yourself. Yeah. And now it's time for you to show that you have learned something and that you're healing.
Wow.
So from that point on, that's exactly what I started doing. I started living. I ended up getting into school and going in the healthcare program. I met a boy who is now my husband. And I ended up calling Chuck one day because I was in the middle of school, and with the felonies and misdemeanors, I had been convicted of them all, because going to drug court, either you graduate and they wipe them clean,
right,
or you fail and you're convicted.
Right. Yeah.
So I ended up calling him. I found out there was a background check for the healthcare program for any healthcare degree.
Right. Yeah.
And I called him and I was like, Chuck, I got to change my degree to business or something, because I'm not going to pass. That's a cost of my choices that I'll have to pay. And that's all I've ever dreamed of being in, was the healthcare industry, because I thought that was a place that I could help the most people.
Yeah.
That was the place that was causing more addicts, I thought, in my mind at the time. And he goes, Mal, how bad do you want it? And I was like, I want to be in the healthcare industry. And he's like, well, then fight for it. And at the time, I was like, I don't get it. You're literally setting me up for failure, because I know for a fact I'm not going to pass the background here. But I was like, okay, I trust you. So I ended up going through the program, straight A's. getting multiple awards and grants and scholarships.
Surprise, right?
Yeah, and school was easy for me. I loved learning. I've always loved learning. So then one night I'm sitting in my living room and my husband and I are playing video games and eating pizza and just enjoying life for the simplicity of what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a knock on my door. It was about 9 p.m. I open the door and no one's there. There's a letter on my doorstep. And my graduation and my background check were required in about 3 days. So I was panicking in that aspect.
Yeah.
I ended up grabbing the letter and reading it and just fell to my knees in tears. And Wes comes over and asks me what it is. And I go, it's a full expungement of every felony and every misdemeanor on my record. Wow. I'm completely free of my past.
Wow. It's amazing. So
I ended up going and doing the background check, and they were like, you're free to graduate. I ended up graduating with honors, got my my bachelor's in healthcare administration.
Wow. Right.
And life was just so good. We ended up having a little girl, my oldest, she's 4 now, Adelaide, which means the light of the world.
Ooh.
Yeah, I always had a fear of never being able to be a mom because I had messed up my body so much from drugs.
Sure, yeah.
So that was a dream come true. And then Wes decided to propose. And as much as I thought this was a good point in my life, surprisingly, it brought up a lot of the triggers for me. Because all of a sudden now I was reminded of who was going to walk me down the aisle. I have no dad.
Yeah.
And that was something that I almost was like, didn't believe in marriage because of.
Yeah.
And I just sat there one night just bawling, like every little girl dreams of the day that, her father's going to walk her down.
Yeah, wow.
And my Wes at the time, my fiance at the time, looks at me and goes, Mal, why wouldn't you ask Chuck? I was like, you're right.
I was hoping it was going to be him.
Yeah, so I ended up graduating probation right before the proposal. So I graduated probation. I started calling Chuck to ask him to walk me down the aisle. He didn't answer, wasn't answering. I kind of thought maybe because of, being in a professional world of what he did and talking to an addict that was graduated, it could have been a conflict of interest.
Sure, yeah.
And no one outside really of me and Chuck, other than my husband, got to see the relationship developed that was so intimate in not a weird way, right? So healing that it was indescribable.
Wow.
So I called him, he wasn't answering. I didn't want to leave a voicemail because I was like, this is way too important. Like, I want to hear his reactions, you know?
Right.
Finally, 3 months goes by, and I still have not heard back. So I'm getting ready for my wedding. I end up asking my grandpa, which he did a great job. And the day before my wedding, I'm in panic. I'm in chaos. I'm getting my hair done. I'm packing all this stuff. And all of a sudden my phone rings and it's an unrecognized number. And I answer it and I was like, hello. And he goes, hey, is this Mal? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, this is Bobby. Well, Bobby is one of Chuck's best friends that I had met in passing a couple times throughout my probation.
Right. Okay.
And he goes, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Chuck was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And they just put him on hospice. So he goes, he hasn't wanted to see anyone, but he asked me to call you and wants you to come see him. And I was like, what? So I literally, in the middle of the call, dropped the phone, run to my car with my hair just completely in a mess, in my pajamas. And my husband's like, Mal, where are you going? And I was like, I'll be right back. So I get in my car and I just drive as fast as I can to his house. And I pull up and there's a ton of cars in front of his house. I get to the door, his wife, I had met her a couple times in passing too, but she grabs my hand, pulls me in. There was more people in this living room than I had ever seen possible.
Yeah.
And it was the most silent room I had ever been in my life. Not a word was being said. Everyone was just heartbroken. You could just feel it.
Yeah, sure.
So he grabs my hand and everyone looks at me. They're like, who is this girl, right? Because Chuck being in his professionalism can't tell people really our relationship again. So she pulls me into his room and the second that door opens, man, my heart just crumbled. It was like this man that had spent his entire life fighting drugs was being made comfortable right now until he was dying.
Yeah.
He was dying. He had lost like almost 100 pounds, and his diagnosis was 3 months from his diagnosis that he had been in this position.
Yeah.
So I ended up sitting next to him, and he put his hand on mine, and I just couldn't stop crying. And his wife sat there next to us, and she goes, he hasn't wanted to see anyone, but he wanted to see you. And I was like, yeah, I've been calling you, dummy. And you could tell that he wanted to talk. He was wanting to talk, but it was just taking so much strength out of him. And he goes, Mal, I need you to know how much I love you. And I need you to know that you are a never lost cause. I'm so thankful for getting the opportunity to work with you. And I need you to do me a favor. And I was like, okay, what's that? He's like, I need you to promise me that you're going to tell your story to as many people as you can reach and continue doing my work and being there for the ones that everyone's convincing is a lost cause.
Wow.
And not knowing the pressure of the promise at that time, of course, I was like, I promise. And he gave me a hug. And as I gave him a hug, he just whispered in my ear, I love you. And I knew walking out that door that day that I was never going to get to see my hero again.
Yeah.
And I remember as I was driving home, there was a sunset. And Chuck had always told me that a sunset is so beautiful because it's your opportunity to say goodbye to the scars and sorrows of the day.
Wow.
But I knew as that sunset was setting that my scars from Chuck's death were going to last long after that sun had set. I went from the worst day of my life to the best day of my life in 24 hours. It was my wedding day. And it was awesome. It was so beautiful. And I got to just finally live in full freedom and in full love and in full strength of everything I had built for myself up until this point. And as my husband and I were about to get on our cruise a few days later, as the sun was about to set, the ship was leaving the dock. The dock was going up, right? The rail or the walker thing up to the ship was leaving the ship.
That's what I would call it.
The
walker
ladder,
thing.
the walker thing, was being pulled up. And they told us, like, you're not going to have service on the ship for a minute. And all of a sudden, my phone started ringing. And I was like, what the heck? And I look at it, and I knew because it was the unrecognized number that had called me the first time.
Before. Yeah.
And I answered that phone, and right as I answered, I didn't even have to say a thing. And Bobby goes, I'm sorry, Mel. Chuck passed. So,
wow.
From that point on, I had no idea how I was going to fulfill this promise. And my husband and I would sit in bed at night, and, he always made the joke. He's like, Mal, I've never seen someone love people so much despite, what they've been through. Like, no matter how many people are crap to you, like, you still just want to love everyone fully. And he goes, if I could just clone you and give you to every person in this world for 2 hours, like, you could love them better and
Game over.
Remind them for sure. Like, you could change their life. And from that point, I wanted to remember Chuck. The one thing I never had gotten was a picture. I never took a picture with Chuck.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Never got one picture with Chuck. And probably one of my biggest regrets. But I ended up sitting down and writing everything I could remember about Chuck. Every lesson he had taught me, every memory, every moment where he completely changed my mindset or my self-esteem, every lesson. And all of a sudden, I had my promise fulfilled right in front of me. I was going to create a book that stood for every dark place I had been in my life, every graphic, scary point that I know other addicts have faced. And I was going to teach them, just like Chuck did, every single lesson that he had ever taught me, every quote, every piece of inspiration that I could put forth in helping guide someone in their first 90 days. So I'm about to publish a book called The Way in 90 Days.
Love it.
And the title comes from the first 90 days of recovery are the most important.
Yeah.
That is the foundation in which you create habits and routines that you'll carry on the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So,
love it.
That's where we're at.
Beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that. I have 1,000 questions. But I love just sitting back and listening to be real and raw. So thank you for sharing that. One thing that really stood out to me, there's a lot of things, but this one is when he called you thought it was going to be 2 weeks before you had to go check in with Chuck, but you're out running and gunning, and then he calls you early. You're like, what? I need to come in now? Right? And then he's like, well, yeah, I'm typing this up. You're going to prison. You're high. You've already failed. And I love it because in that moment, you actually started fighting for you. You said, I just want to be loved. I just want to know people care. Like you really started advocating for what you really needed, right? Because you could have come up with every excuse in the book at that point. You could have said, well, God, I don't know. I'm sorry. I went home and there was some drugs there, or my friends, they offered it to me, or what. You didn't go into any of that. You just said, this is what I'm really feeling. And I think again, I don't know the whole situation, but man, I can imagine Chuck going, wow, this girl is really fighting for this. I can feel the genuineness of what she's saying, and therefore kind of open up that door like, okay, let's move forward.
Yeah. And I think as addicts, who are in active addiction or in, that mentality still, that it is easier to blame others. And I think you can tell when someone's really made a change when they start really taking accountability, and not because they have to, but because they have to see what the reality of the situation is to identify what needs to change. And I think it brings us back to what you were asking earlier about how things, the odds are always against you. I hadn't really hit my rock bottom. I mean, if you think about it, I had gotten high right before my sentencing. So I didn't really care. Prison could have been my rock bottom, but Chuck saved me from really hitting that at that point.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he pulled that paper out that I was like, I'm literally about to throw away the one person that has faith in me.
Right.
And it's like he took a chance on me by risking his career to save me.
Yeah.
And I'm proving that he was wrong and he didn't deserve that.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible story. So here you are, you're getting ready. You're going to be publishing this book, and you're doing a bunch of other things. I know you love speaking. You're very passionate about what you do. You're passionate about life now. I mean, right?
Oh yeah.
She's got a couple friends with her today here in the studio with us. You probably heard them in the background a few times. They're crying over here. They're laughing. But just the energy you bring is pretty remarkable, actually. You live your life with passion, and talk about that. Why is that so important? Like, why are you so passionate? I mean, I think I know the answer to that, but I want our listeners to hear why are you so high on life? No pun intended. Like, honestly, you really are.
So, I mean, I feel like once you have experienced a darkness that I have, you begin to really appreciate, like we were speaking about earlier, beauty. You appreciate freedom. You have an appreciation because you have something to compare it to.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong about this, but people who haven't seen the darkness that we have, it's hard for them to see the beauty we have because they don't have a darkness to compare it to.
Yeah.
Which is why I think rock bottom becomes a foundation for most people that are ready for this recovery, like you and I. As far as my passion for people, I mean, I run into, so I'm a manager at a little cafe in St. George, and I've been there since the day I got out of jail. She hired me, so I've been there over almost 7 years now.
Wow.
And
awesome.
it's been awesome because every time I'm serving a table, I have that same mindset of, okay, there's a reason that these people were put in my section. Of all 5 servers, you know, why am I getting this table? And so I just make sure that every table that leaves, like, I've gotten something from, I can build a relationship with, that I've built rapport with. And if I can help anyone, I will. You know, I meet people who say that they've given up on people, or you're like, oh, I'm going to choose myself because, you know, you can't trust people. You can't this, that.
Yeah.
I think it's really sad to hear that, because that's what this world is lacking, is connection. And no matter how many people in my life have hurt me or lied or done something wrong to me, like, how I treat people and how I show up for people, that's a reflection of my character. You know, it's like they say, you know, respect is given and trust is earned. I'll respect everyone because that's a reflection of who I am.
Yeah.
I'll love you not because you deserve necessarily the love or you're someone who betrayed me. I'll love you because that's a reflection of who I want to be seen as. I forgive you because that's a reflection of who I am.
Yeah.
And so I just think that the best way to change the world is to really be an example and put those actions into words. And I'm not going to sit here and, you know, tell people that I'm going to love you better. I'm just going to show you. And all it took was for Chuck loving me until I had the strength to love myself and reminding me of the things that were worth loving.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, you know, I mean, the programs that we have nowadays for addiction and recovery are great, but I think that's something that really needs to be brought into every program, is focusing on what is valuable about them. They already know what their flaws are. They already know what the negatives are. Remind them of what's worth loving, and those might be the things that keep them from pulling a fudging trigger.
It's okay, we're good.
Of pulling a trigger. Like, I'm passionate because I know that the resources that were there for me were good, but there's so much room for better. And I want to be a part, and I would be dang sad if I couldn't be a part of making those better. I'm trying to be extremely...
She's passionate, people. Hold on.
I'm trying not to
Buckle up.
swear. I'm doing actually really well. But
I love it.
I just love life because I love it.
I know you, and I love that you love life, and I love that I'm sitting here with you. I love it.
And I love that I'm here. Thank you.
Your story reminds me of this statement: the greater the darkness, the greater the light. The greater the sinner, the greater the saint. You enjoy the light so much because you were in the dark for so long.
Right.
You appreciate it more.
Right.
It's a lot brighter to you, right? You know, imagine being in a room that's had the light off for 40 years, and then someone flips it on. That's what's going on here, you know? And speaking about that love, like, what you do is you give it away. See, you're giving away love every time you talk to someone at a table, or just sitting here with me or a friend or whatever you're doing, you know? And I really, I really believe this, that if you master the first 11 steps of AA, you will drink and use again. If you master step 12, you'll never touch another drop. You'll never use again. What's step 12? It's giving it away. Go help someone else. Go give away that love. And I think that's why you're such a passionate person, and people feel that, they're in your wake going, geez, who is that chick? Right? Wow. Right? Whereas before, your light was dimmed because of the drugs, because of the self-hatred, because you didn't think you were worthy, right? But now that you actually realize, well, that was all a lie. and Chuck helped bring that out, just by him reaching out and helping you through this process. It's pretty amazing, and so props to you, Chuck, dedicating this to Chuck, right? I mean, it was amazing. Guys like that, we need more people like that, and I think that's why he told you to do what you're doing. It's freaking amazing.
Yeah, this world will know Chuck's name, and I will make sure of that through my book, because one of the very first pages is a full dedication to him.
Yeah, awesome.
And I just hope, I know that he would be proud.
Yeah.
And I just hope that I can fully fulfill that promise. That's my motivation today is I made a promise to someone that I owe my life to and that I wouldn't be here without.
Yeah.
I really don't think I would. And the least I could do is carry on his message to every single person I have the opportunity in meeting.
I love it.
So
Yeah.
my goal and dreams for obviously where I want to go and where I hope to be, I just want to be able to go and speak to anybody. I mean, I don't care if we're on a curb speaking to the streets of New York. I will.
Yeah.
I want to go to rehabs. I want to go to high schools and mainly high schools because, you know, like you, I saw your podcast with Al.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved how you said that you were going to help kids and drug-free, that's me. For me, I've noticed most stories of addiction, they start in high school.
Yeah.
And you're doing this pre-game, right? Like this pre-initiation to bring in awareness. But I think once they start getting into this, the stresses of life
Right.
and the pressures and the environments that they're going to be facing, I want to reach every high school I can in the world, really,
Yeah.
to not only share my story, but be able to help them understand that, like, I'm someone you can relate to. I'm not a counselor that has this degree that's going to read you off a book. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to talk because I know what's coming. I've been there and I was successful. And addiction chooses anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
You're not an exception to whether you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And if I can build a rapport enough, the people at least feel like they can reach out to me. Like, I want to be one of those inspiring leaders that people can message on Facebook and be like, hey, Mal, like, I'm struggling. Can we go to lunch? Like,
Yeah.
I just want to be real and I want to be spreading as much love as I can.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful. Okay. I know you've shared some amazing things already. I have a question for you. If there's someone listening to this right now who's in that darkness, who's struggling, they're in that place where they don't think anyone cares. And what would you tell them right now that's listening to this?
I would say that you are not alone and that this world needs you, needs every part of you, the flaws, the things to fix, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because every one of us makes such a difference in this world.
Yeah.
And it's just really finding how you can do that. And that first step comes from just being yourself and allowing people to love you for who you are. I think in society, there's an expectation that all of us hold ourselves to, you know, this perfect image of what we should look like. And I feel like that pressure can become a lot, especially for people that are already questioning their self-worth, already questioning their value. And I would just encourage them to remember that you're not alone. This world needs you, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's going to be people that love you for every part of that.
Yeah.
And
Love that.
so,
Very well said. The world needs you. Yeah, that couldn't be more true. I love that. If someone wants to follow you, learn more about your book, learn more about you, ask you questions, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
so I have a Instagram and a Facebook page. They are Ruesch Recovery. I don't
That's
know.
Ruesch.
Yep. Ruesch Recovery. I also have a personal Facebook page that is open to anyone who would like to be that. It's just my full name, Malory Ruesch. I also have a website that is rueschrecovery.com. On my website, you are able to contact me for booking a speaking engagement, booking a seminar, and I don't care how big or how small it is. I just want to be a part of everything I can. And then also people can get the first chapter of my book, The Way in 90 Days, for free on my website.
Oh, right on.
They just got to send me their email and I'll send it right to them. So,
Beautiful.
and I'm hoping that all the people who do, you can reserve your copy as well. All the people that will reserve my copy ahead of time will get a discount in the final book sale. So
Right. Beautiful. I love it. Well, I can't thank you enough for driving all the way up here to share your story with all of us today. I'm blessed because I get to sit here face to face with you, but our listeners will be blessed too. And I challenge anyone listening to this right now that if you have a sorry, Malory's doing this to me.
you're
Thank
doing
you.
great.
It's my turn. But if you have anyone who's struggling, because again, people struggle. We all have our struggles. If you have a son or a daughter or a niece or a nephew or a cousin or a mom or a dad who's not just struggling with addiction, if they're just down or depressed, have them listen to this podcast. Give them the link. Please share this with as many people as you can, because the more we can get that out there, and reach out to Malory, ask her a question. If you're a teacher in high school, book her to be in, to come speak to your student body. They need to hear this message more than anyone, just like you were saying. So please reach out and check out our website and check out our book when it's ready to go. I can't wait for that. That's really cool. You get to reserve your copy now, right? If you go onto the website, you can do that.
Yep, absolutely. And I will say too that this book is not just for the addict, but it does give a 90-day step-by-step healing program of every lesson that I think is so important within the first 90 days of recovery. But also, it's not just for the addict. It's for anyone in this world that has been impacted by addiction. Whether you're a mother that has a child and you don't know what to do, whether you're a brother that wants to support your sister and have no idea how, this book is going to be for you.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I say this all the time to my clients. I butchered it. Addiction is your wake-up call to greatness. Adversity is your wake-up call to greatness. You are greatness. And because of your adversity and your addiction and everything you've been through, that's why you're so powerful in what you're doing now. It's really cool to watch. It's beautiful. Any last words before we wrap it up?
I just want to say thank you so much for letting me come. And guys, that's okay. I butchered
folks.
it too. We're doing great. It's those emotions getting in the way and stuff. But I just want to say how thankful I am to be here, how thankful I am to have such an amazing support system, to be here with me and be able to witness, the true miracles of what I'm doing and get to see me grow from the bottom to the top. And I just am so proud of you and everything that you're doing. And I hope that it is making a difference. And don't let a day go by or let anyone tell you that what you're doing is not making a difference. And clearly the numbers will show you. But I think there's a real humbling feeling knowing that we're doing this because we want to, for no other reason, but we have love to give.
Yeah.
And you have such a strong presence and such a strong mind. And I'm so excited to see you hit 1 million downloads. I know you'll do it. So come on, guys. Let's get him there.
Let's do that. Yeah. Very well said. Thank you again for joining us. And listeners, I told you this was going to be an amazing story. Malory Ruesch, please check her out. Please, like we said, share this. I love you guys. Thank you for supporting me, week after week. I pinch myself. I can't believe I'm here. Again, thanks to our sponsors for believing me as well. And until next time, best of luck with everything, Malory. Take care.
Thank you.